Morning, folks. John McNamara, your Wilbur-Ellis agronomist at the Plattsmouth, Nebraska branch with your August update. Changing gears a little bit as far as what we've done normally throughout this summer. We're going to start talking with beans first. And so there's a lot of things going on these last few days of August in the soybean fields. And it is also a product of the weather that we've had so far. So if you remember, we've struggled with water more on the dry side than the wet side until we got to July. And that's key point as far as pod development and yield development in soybeans. That's great. However, we've also incurred a lot of foliar fungal problems. There's a lot of brown stem rot around. There's some sudden death. There's some sun scald. There's a number of things that are turning these soybean fields browner and spottier with disease than we typically see in August. Now, the hot weather that we had this last week, and we're going to get some more here the last part of August and into September, is also speeding up the maturity of some of these soybeans. So it's not that I'm surprised that we're seeing what we see. It's just a little unsettling once we had all this water and we've had a good soybean crop developing, which we still do, and to see it kind of fade via fungal disease and that type of thing. Typically it's kind of a normal thing given everything that's happened so far. And we're all geniuses looking backwards as far as what happened, what we should have done, could have done. But very typical of what I would expect this year. All right, so here we are back in our Sentinel soybean field. We've been following this one since it was planted back in late April. And if you remember, this piece was a trial or a competitive trial of ExtendFlex soybeans here with E3 soybeans here. And it has struggled with puckering and that type of thing. We focused on that. But now we're kind of at the point of development where rubber meets the road. What's this stuff look like in late August? What's it looking like in the bin as we get into the next month, 6 weeks? So as you can kind of see as we pan across this, we've got some weed control issues in these E3 beans, fairly sizable ones. If you look more toward the right-hand column, these ExtendFlexes, taller, canopied better, so they have less weed population that you see. And we've got 2 ExtendFlex numbers in here. They kind of go up and down in height, but where we've got some weed control issues is primarily the E3 product. So now we talk about pod count. So when we look at these things, you can do it 2 ways. You can look at spread the canopy between these 2 rows. So we've got a 3-2 soybean, same maturity, planted the same way. And you can look at pod development. So if we pull up and we look at one of the ExtendFlex beans, pod count, and this is again how I typically do this, is just pull off some of these leaves to get you a better visual appearance on what the pod set really is. Traits are great tools for weed management. However, it's the genetics that put it in the bin. That's what pays your bills. And when we look at a lot of these options, this has been argued and will be argued for a number of months to come as far as the fit of E3s versus ExtendFlex beans. In my mind, it generally always comes down to this, aside from all the other issues at hand, cupping and shortering beans and that type of thing. So once we kind of get through this, you kind of get a better idea as far as pod count on your ExtendFlex. I did a real bad job of this. So that's one example of what you can see with some of the ExtendFlex products. If you look at what we find with one of the E3s from a pod count, much shorter, obviously. And it also looks like it is struggling from a pod count / pod fill standpoint. Last year, when we did this same trial, we found about a 4.5 bushel difference between the ExtendFlex and the E3s. Same maturity, sprayed with Liberty over the top, and which leads me to believe that there is some differences in genetic potential and yield there. You could have all the trade in the world. But if it doesn't have the genetics to back it, you may not be very happy with that product. So here again, we will, this will be our last in-field visit before we get to harvest, as far as doing some assessments, but it appears that the E3 beans have really struggled this year. All right. That being said, let's hop across the road and we'll give you an update on corn.
So we're back in the cornfield with our August update and things that we typically think about last week of August going into September. Now, maturity is one. This is a 105-day maturity corn planted the 1st of April, and it's old by calendar date and maturity standpoint. We've black layered this corn. Corn moisture, by our estimation, should be hanging around 25%. So we talk about corn's grain moisture as a signal, if you will, as far as stock quality and when the time to harvest. And that's debatable as far as drying costs go. When you can, could you pick 25, 28, 30% corn? Sure. Depends upon what your usage is for it, whether it's for silage or for grain. But when we talk about physical maturity, that occurs at 35, 40% moisture. And then we're just talking about dry down. Now, this year again has been the tale of about 3 different seasons, from too hot, too dry, too early, to too wet, almost, if that's possible, in July. And now through August, we've had a fair amount of moisture from a rain standpoint, but also all these dewy mornings, which has caused other things like we were talking about in soybeans from a disease standpoint. So we typically talk about stock quality as being our biggest issue at this stage of development. How you generally do this is go through what we call the pinch test. So if you look at the plant and you look at these first few nodes from the soil line up, 1, 2, and 3, you just grab that and try to pinch it. How solid is it? And this one's very solid. Are they all that way? And you might see some corn that the tops are starting to go out of it, which is again a natural process for maturing standpoint corn. With the prospect for high heat again and hot dry weather coming here in the next week or the first week of September, you're going to see a lot of this corn mature quickly or turn very quickly. And is that a product of the weather? Absolutely. We might also go into some of the elemental needs, why some of the tops go out of these plants. Is that again a nutritional thing? Maybe. My suspicion is that you might have plenty of nutrition in the soil, you just can't access it because it's been so dry. So big thing here is to watch your grain moisture and watch your stock quality. Use that pinch test basically as a standard as far as how to schedule harvest.